podcast platforms enable you and give you the tools to backdate or set up like, hey, this episode is going to go out on this day, even though I'm backdating it to 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, it's still going to bring value to the people listening to the episodes.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It is your host, Adam Adams, and today I am joined with Junaid Ahmed, who actually is another podcast host. So we're going to find out a little bit about what he's done, what he's learned, what he wants to pour into you and support you. And what's cool is he's done 389 episodes as we record now. By the time this comes out and he's at the 400 episode mark, you're going to be like, that's somebody I want to learn from. He's been doing this for a minute since 2018, so maybe slightly longer than a minute. And after hundreds of episodes, let's find out what he has to pour into you. But Junaid, my first question is, why, when I look at Apple, are you under 400 episodes today? I mean, when the listener hears this, it'll be over. But on the episode numbers, I'm seeing episode 518, 517 that you did way back in June. So 518, 517, 516, for example, you're already above the fives, but you're below the fours. So have you done a whole bunch that you've unpublished, or what's going on there?
Hey, Adam, first of all, thank you so much for bringing me on to your podcast. Super excited to be here. And that is a great, great question. So I started numbering my episodes, calling them season 1, episode 1. So that was 101, right? Okay. So from that perspective, I've done 5 seasons, and then each season has had that many episodes. So my first season only had 68 episodes. I was like, okay, this is fun. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just solo talking to myself. And then as I pivoted the podcast from documenting my journey as a beekeeper and a hobbyist to interviewing other entrepreneurs who are taking their passions, their hobbies into production, into profit, into their profession, I was like, okay, I need to make a switch. So from episode or season 2, right? So that's essentially becomes 200, but it's just season 2.
Yeah. So if on your podcast, if you only have 10 episodes in a season, you might get to episode 500 in about 50 episodes. If
you can technically do that, yes.
Now, making sense. So looking through on your podcast, a couple things that I'm noticing, and I want to address this with you real quick. First off, it looks as though every episode that I see is they have a guest, a different guest every time. Ian, Mara, and so on. Out of curiosity, have you ever done a solo episode where it's just you, or have you always interviewed other people?
Of course. So the first season, like I mentioned, was a solo only podcast. I was recording in my car, going back and forth from work. I was like, hey, I need to create content. I need to get into the practice of publishing stuff. So that was all solo. And then even through season 2 and somewhere season 3, I did some solo episodes where I would reflect on, hey, I went to this event, I want to reflect. I did my bike ride, I want to reflect. So there are a whole bunch of solo episodes. In fact, episode 500, episode 502, and 504, I believe, are also solo episodes where I talk about what it's been like going through this journey of being a podcaster, or what it takes to produce your own podcast. So that's been a really fun, reflective episode creation.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I'm looking at it. I'm seeing 502. I think that there's maybe 503. Looks like it might be your personal episodes. So you do that. And what are your thoughts about solo episode and interview episodes? Is there one that works better for your, let's call your listener, your avatar? On this podcast, we talk about somebody called an avatar all the time. It's not a blue person. It's not a Facebook depiction of.
It's a persona that we relate to. Yes.
Yeah. So your avatar, is who? Who do you serve in your business? Who do you serve like on your podcast? And is it the same person?
That's an excellent question. And I like to think that it's the same person, but it might be two different people. Now, the whole podcasting started as a way for me to grow as not just a podcaster, but also as a person. So it acted as a personal development for me. And as I'm bringing guests on my podcast, I'm learning from them, and it enabled me to become a storyteller that I wasn't. So podcasting enabled me to do that. So as I'm bringing so many folks to the episode, they're teaching me how they've done, right? They're telling stories of their own struggles, their own origin stories, how they took one thing to the next thing. So I'm learning and absorbing from them. And I'm hoping that my audience and my avatar is also somebody who's growing with me, who's growing with these lessons. And then the reflective episodes basically combine all of the stuff that I've learned and put it out there. So I like to do both, inclined to do more of these solo episodes. I just had the time, right? It's so hard to book a time with yourself, but it's easy to be held accountable when somebody else books a time on your calendar. So
I feel it. This is what happened to me on my podcast for the longest time. Junaid, you and I have experienced this around the same timing, like through the same season, because this is kind of what happened to you. I think you had lots of extra videos and audio recorded, and you were like, let's just get this out. And I was in a similar place. We had something like 8 months. No, it was 4 months. We had 4 months of every at least weekly episode. So I don't know, what would that be? Like 16
probably
extra?
6, yeah.
And so we were 4 months at minimum. And I always remembered, hey, sorry, I'm recording with Junaid today. And let's just say it's July. And I'll go to Junaid, hey, sorry, this won't come out until November. Like, it's going to be Thanksgiving when this is coming out.
Exactly.
And that made just a couple of people sad. They're like confused. Well, then why are we recording now? Like, why don't we wait 4 months so whatever I have to say is fresh? But ended up happening for me, and I'm about to ask you what happened to you because it was really close, but different.
Yeah.
What happened to me is my teammate, her name is Jen. She manages my podcast. Jen would call me, message me all the time. Like, I remember we had 4 months. And so for about 4 or 5 months, I hardly recorded anything because I just thought, you know what? I have plenty.
Yeah.
And for a while I said, let's just do 6 episodes a week instead of 2. Like, let's triple it so that we can get those out a little bit faster. So she did that. And then I'm like, are we doing a little bit better? That was the only question I asked. Are we doing a little bit better? She's like, yeah, we're doing better now. And so I just didn't record any solo interview episodes. And on my podcast, Junaid, I go every other. So it's going to be this podcast episode with you is an interview. And then the last episode and next episode are both solos. And so Jen was on my case all the time about, especially when I went up to 6 episodes a week. She was on my case all the time about, we need solo episodes. We need solo because we go every other.
Because she's
so here I was stressed out about solos every week and not paying attention to my interviews. This is exactly how you and I met.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to a couple of friends and podcasters because Jen called me and said, Adam, like, do you have any interviews happening before next Wednesday? Because we got to publish something on Monday. And I go, Jen, that's impossible. We have like 4 months of podcast episodes.
That was 4 months ago.
Yeah. And so I reached out to a few people. I think one of them was Alex Sanfilippo. One of them was the lady who owns Cap Show. I'm forgetting her name for temporarily. Deirdre. One of them was this other guy who they all know a lot of podcasters.
Yeah.
So I reach out to these 3 and I go, I need your best. I didn't tell them
what's going on.
I'm in huge trouble now. I didn't say that. I just said, hey, who's been your best guests? And so that's how you and I met. But you've got kind of a similar-ish story because you were publishing pretty frequently for a long, long time. And as we record, you haven't published in something like a month. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's been a bit. It's been a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So I want to find out about you and your solo episodes, your interview episodes, how you got a backlog and what you did about it and how you feel today. I know that's like a 77-part question, but give us a little bit of background on what's going on with your podcast as we record.
I love that, Adam, because when you said, you're publishing 6 episodes, was that about right?
Yeah. Okay. 3 solos and 3 interviews.
Last year was every week I was recording 4 to 5 episodes, interview episodes. And so by the end of, say, 6-7 weeks, I had a backlog of 50 episodes. So when people were asking, when is my episode going to publish? Like, it might be a few months. I didn't know exactly because I got to do all the calculation, figure out all the numbers out. So now I was like, it's going to take this long. And what I ended up doing is I created a spreadsheet and I said, okay, let's see, depending on all the episodes that I've recorded, where are they going to land? So then I can tell the person, hey, your episode is going to come out on this specific day. It sounded all well and good, but then I had to communicate that with my team member, who's an amazing podcast producer. And she's been going at it and we've been together for about 3 years. And it's a beautiful story. So I was like, okay, I'm getting this. We were still publishing 1 episode at a time, but I was getting messages and questions from the guests that had been on my podcast. Like, hey, when is my episode airing? I can't wait to promote it. We had such a fun conversation.
I think that's like the way they're really saying deep down, where the hell is this thing? Like, what is your problem? But what comes out is, ooh, I really want to promote this for you. And I'm not saying there isn't anyone who genuinely just wants to do that, but usually what's really in the back of their head is what's going on with this episode.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, let me catch up. And I didn't record for the past 6 months. Essentially, I would need to record once here and there, depending on who is coming out. I have a lot of requests waiting in my emails like, hey, I have this person ready to be on your podcast, because guesting is a huge thing now. It's minimum effort on anybody's part to be a guest on a podcast. Like, it's the least that you can do. You just got to show up. The hosts are doing all of the work. So there's a ton of people that want to be guests on podcasts. So what I did is, okay, I can publish 2 episodes a week, and I can still be in the safe zone where I'm now starting to record new episodes, and I'll still won't have a gap. Now, something that I don't know most people do or not, but I make sure that even though it looks like June is empty, right? From June to July 12th, it is going to be filled up because I am dating my episodes so that they drop on a specific date. So that's
wait. So you're doing some trickery.
I'm doing some trickery, yes.
Basically, later on, whenever it published, you backdate it.
Yes, correct.
Okay. I want you to go into that.
Yes.
I've said this to a lot of clients. They'll come and then they will say to me, Adam, we effed up. Like, we didn't post for a while. And they never think of that first.
Right.
They never consider what you've already been doing.
Correct.
And I've learned over time that the podcast algorithms, the playing algorithms, are pretty serious. So
yes,
if you're publishing on time every time, they can put you in front of other people. They can trust you. They can say, oh, okay, Junaid or Adam or Sarah is publishing every Tuesday at 5 a.m. or whatever that day is.
Yeah.
Wednesday at 6 p.m. But it's regular. And they say that means that Junaid will come back. So they put it in front of more people. So it's easier to find you, even if people don't put in your name or your podcast name.
Right.
But if they're just kind of going to your topic. And so my client will come, or a potential person will come and ask me and say, yeah, we've slowed down. It's gotten hard. We need your help to like offload all this process so that we can do it. And one thing that I have been saying, and I don't know if it literally works because like I haven't seen the podcast playing algorithm. I've never seen them post the algorithm specifically, like Apple saying, if you backdated, it works or something. But I assume that it will be better than having a big blank space.
Yeah.
First by the podcast playing algorithm, but also by people who come out after and look at the podcast and see they're scrolling through, and then now they don't have to see a big gap. So it's kind of like a little bit of social proofing as well. So I want to find out more about why you do it like that.
Sure.
Because you're the first person, I think, besides myself, my own team, that I've ever heard doing that trickery of backdating episodes.
Right.
Give us a little bit more about that, like for the listener who's hearing it, but maybe because they haven't launched their podcast already, they need to kind of really understand what we're really talking about right now. So I'll turn it back to you.
So first of all, before I even get to the reason, first of all, when I'm having these conversations with the guests, I make sure that it is an evergreen content. Yes, we went through the COVID era. We talk about the pandemic, so it's in the episode, but it's also a very evergreen content. So it's not locked into, hey, it needs to drop on this specific date for it to matter because they're going to be pushing out. There might be some scenarios where that happens. I think I was listening to Kevin Harrington, and they're like, hey, we're going to be launching these 120 episodes and they're going to all drop on the same week because we're launching this book. So it kind of makes sense. So you're recording in bulk and then you're dropping them on a specific date. The reason I'm backdating, and you can have hiatus in your podcast release schedule. So if I look at my schedule on analytics, there have been hiatus. Like, okay, the podcast went in hiatus for December, or it was in hiatus during summer break because you have families and whatnot. Now, the plan was, hey, I'm going to have plenty of episodes. My publisher is going to catch up and make sure that these are scheduled to go out on specific dates. But guess what? Life friggin' happens, right? You have a death in the family. You have a new kid in the family. There's a flood. Like all of these things happens, but doesn't mean that you can't use the system to your advantage. And that's where podcast platforms enable you and give you the tools to backdate or set up like, hey, this episode is going to go out on this day. Even though I'm backdating it to 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, it's still going to bring value to the people listening to the episodes.
Awesome. Junaid, we only have one problem.
My God.
I have more questions for you than I think we have time. So we're going to jump through a couple things.
Okay.
First off, please remind me, who is it that you serve in your business? Who's that person? What are they going through and how do you help?
Absolutely. So the person that I'm helping in business is a podcast host or podcast guest that is looking to promote their business, their book, their coaching platform, or whatever it is that they are serving. Podcasting enables you to create content that's evergreen that you can then later use for social proof as well as creating other pieces of content. I help in the space where I make sure that you look good and you sound good so that your video is top notch. So I help in making sure that you have the right gear, you have the right setup. And then so when you're creating content, you're not worrying about it being reusable for the future.
And one thing in what you do to serve, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more about a video type podcast that includes all the video versus just a simple audio experience only. You're more on that video side. And because you've got the book that teaches people how to have really good content recorded with an iPhone, which actually we'll link below. And you yourself have a gorgeous studio. Our listener today who's not seeing us on YouTube, like it just looks immaculate. The lighting, everything else looks really, really good in the background. And furthermore, Junaid, will you do your camera switcher? Will you just push it a few times for anybody who's happens to be on the video today so that they can check that out? And we will link to our YouTube channel to be able to go back there. But what is interesting is I just recorded, I think it was yesterday or just last week. But recently, within the last 2 weeks, I recorded one of my solo episodes. Every other episode is solo.
Yeah.
And on that one, I talked about camera switchers. Somebody asked me, they said, how do we keep people engaged? And what they actually said was how do we keep our viewers watching? That was the technical question. How do we keep our viewers watching? And I think it's funny because I was like, I know some ideas, but I don't know everything because I'm more of just plain audio.
Right.
Now, our team will edit video, publish video, or whatever, but I don't feel like I'm the expert at how to grow a YouTube channel, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like is we did talk about video switchers. We did actually mention that in that episode, and I don't know if it'll come out before or after the episode with you.
Sure.
But it's going to come out around the same time. And so we talked about video switchers being a thing that you can do on the video experience to keep your viewers' attention. Because sometimes if you just have that still head,
right,
it can get boring. And so what I want to ask you right now is just 2 or 3 tips that somebody who's doing a visual experience with their podcast, where they might put it on Vimeo or YouTube or on their own website or some other place with the video, that we can keep the attention of the viewer.
Right, the viewer.
And I feel like I may have fell short on answering that. There's a few things that we put up. One of them was utilizing the video switcher, but I'm curious from you, what do you think is the best way to keep people on your video experience?
That's an excellent question, Adam. And I don't know if we have enough time, but I will try my best. So we watch and consume a ton of video content. Watch any TV show, any movie. Every 5 to 6 seconds, the scene is changing, because 5 to 6 seconds is around the time that you are going to engage, depending on the dialogue. Even there, if there's a monologue, you're going to see the scene switching, because your ears might be engaged, but your eyes might be wandering off and looking at the phone while you're listening to the dialogue, right? So it all comes down to what type of message is being portrayed in this video. Now, one of the best places to share your content, video content, is YouTube, because they push that content and they find related content around what you're sharing. And I think with the latest update that YouTube has done, you can now have a podcast playlist on your YouTube channel, which they are also pushing and promoting. So what are the things that you can do to promote or keep the audience engaged? Have a plan for your show. So it's like when you watch, let's say, The Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, he's got different segments. So maybe have different segments in your show, in your podcast, and then you can use something like a Stream Deck to set up different scenes where you have a shot side by side where you're in the same shot with your guest, or you can have a 3 video up where you're now showing another image, or you're just adding another image. You're just changing stuff to keep the audience engaged. I'm like, hey, this is what we're talking about, because we are a very visual human being. So you want to make sure that the concept that you're talking about, maybe you have a little video of that concept so that they capture it even faster, right? So you have the other ways people have been doing, they've putting captions up where captions are embedded into the video. So caption embedding, you can have images, you can have videos playing, you can have side-by-side video, you can have different angle shots, B-roll. So there's a ton of terminology that can be integrated and programmed actually into a Stream Deck. So with a push of a button, you can bring up a different scene. With a push of a button, you can bring a different layout of what's happening in the show.
How many camera angles do you have in your studio right now?
In my studio, I have about 7 different camera angles. Right now I have 2 enabled. The third one, camera is asleep, is on a tripod. I also have a camera that's point from top down, so you can see my little desk over here that I might work on. Again, it's all designed for a very specific reason, because I do Amazon Lives showcasing products and showcasing people, hey, this is how this stuff works. So for my specific setup, what
is Amazon Live? Why don't I know what that is? Is that part of podcasting?
So this is not part of podcasting at all. So Amazon, and this is basically going on a tangent, on a different tangent.
That's okay. Let's go on a quick tangent.
So I
think somebody listening agrees with me. They're like, what? What does he do there?
So Amazon stepped into live streaming so every once in a while, if you go to Amazon.com on their shopping site, you'll see somebody's video or somebody's live streaming about a product. So they actually introduced this about 4 years ago, and they hired these high-end actors and they set up this entire studio and they did this whole production, and they were getting no views at all on these live streams. So they're like, okay, we're going to scratch this. It's too expensive. And then they opened up the influencer program where they're bringing in other affiliates that are already creating content for their YouTube channel, promoting a specific product. Could be home products, could be clothing, could be technology. They're like, hey, we're launching this new Amazon live stream platform where you can have a live stream on Amazon and share the products. And then you can have a little carousel on the bottom. So when you click on each of the products, the affiliate commission goes to you. And funny enough, July 11th and 12th is, as you know, Prime Day. So there's huge promotions and there's a ton of influencers or Amazon influencers live streaming about different products. They bought a whole bunch of products so they could showcase it on Amazon live streams, and they make a pretty good commission base through their Amazon Live platform. So that's been around for about 2.5 years now, and it's growing slowly. Even J.Lo stepped in and she's got a little live stream going on to promote her own products.
I did not know that. But what's randomly interesting is that I purchased a bunch of like ring equipment, or I think it was ring equipment. It's whatever my friend told me to buy.
Sure.
He's like, these are the things that you need. But yesterday, because I've been just putting off ordering them just because of timing. Yesterday, he was like, hey, these are on sale right now. And I think I saved like 40+%. It was like hundreds of dollars that I saved off of this equipment. And yeah, if I waited one more day, I wouldn't have been able to buy it. So let's get back on topic, because I've got so many more questions that I want to ask you, and I'm not going to be able to. We talked about your avatar a little bit today. We talked about the person that you serve in business is somebody who has a podcast and probably a video podcast. You help them set up their studio. You help them get all the camera angles. You help them figure out the plan. You help them know how to do each and every part. And your podcast, you said it might kind of serve the same person. It might be more than one person, is called Hacks and Hobbies. Hacks and Hobbies. And I'm thinking, if I want to do a podcast studio, I don't think that I would see the words Hacks and Hobbies and know immediately that I've got to listen to this. So I want to find out, who's your avatar for the podcast and where does it overlap?
That's a great question. And it's been on the top of my head. I was actually thinking of launching a new calling it Home Studio Show. Hey, it's the Home Studio Show. You learn all the things you need to know, learn about home studios. But guess what? Life happens. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I can pivot the podcast once more, because as humans, we grow out of one passion into another passion. So maybe I can change the name. Maybe I can keep the brand and add a description to, hey, this is what you get to learn here, or maybe add a new episode. Again, it's something that's been on top of mind. But because the people that I'm talking to on the podcast are specifically my target audience, they are the people that are getting to come into my world, because now they know me a little better than they would have by just listening to the episode.
So to clarify, the guests that you have on the podcast, they're all people that could work with you in business.
Correct.
Okay. So are they all podcast hosts, or who do you interview for the most part?
So either podcast host or they are guesting continuously to promote their business.
Got it.
So they're already an entrepreneur. They understand the value of being guests or having content out there in their space.
And how do they find out that you can help them with their home studio?
Mostly when they have a conversation with me or see me in my studio like this.
Okay. So out of curiosity, how exactly do they find out? Do they find out before you work together, during the podcast, or right after the podcast?
So before we record the podcast episode, I have a discovery call where they come in like, hey, I want to be a guest on the podcast. So when we have this discovery call, I immediately see their video and I was like, this is some of the things that you should consider setting up, updating, because that's going to create a everlasting content that you're going to be proud of to promote. So they understand that. And then as they're going through, I'm like, here's some of the things that you can do. Here's a list of stuff you can do. If you want more help, I'm available. And then once you're done, we'll schedule an episode and we'll do a recording.
Okay. So let me clarify. You give them a couple things that they can change on their own without paying you.
Correct.
And then you get on the podcast And then some of them say, how do I finish doing this? What else do I need? And then you work together?
Correct.
Okay. Got it. So let's wrap up today's episode. And
absolutely,
Junaid, let's get you back on our podcast. Absolutely, for sure. There's a lot that I want to go into with you. I will mention a couple of takeaways that I've gotten today from you. And I'm not going to get them all. Not going to get every single one. But one thing that I definitely found interesting was that you are one of the only other people that I've ever met who will backlog some episodes, backdate them so that they do show that they came out at a certain time. Yeah. That's one takeaway. Another takeaway is that you do some solo episodes, some interview episodes. You like a good mix of it. The interview episodes seem to serve you a lot because you're interviewing your perfect avatar. You're having a conversation with your perfect avatar. And the other bonus that we got from you is that you use a discovery call prior to the interview, prior to having them on your show. I liked that as well because not everybody does that. Some people don't even think about that. Yeah. And a couple things can happen when we do a pre-interview, a discovery call. One of the things that can happen is you can sift through those people that only want to self-promote. Instead of getting them right on your show, and you could tell that they're not there to give the value to the listener. They're just there to sell whatever they want to sell. So you can omit that. You can avoid that. Yes. Also, you have the opportunity to be the expert with your perfect avatar. So with Junaid, if you're listening, listen to what he does. He interviews his perfect person. He gives them free advice. There's this law. It's called the law of reciprocity. Junaid gives hundreds or thousands of dollars of advice to somebody without any strings attached. Then if they come on his show, maybe one time they'll say, hey, that was so helpful. I feel so much better about my studio now. And they might say, what else can I change? Or how can I help you? Or because they know other podcasters, they can refer people. So I think that discovery call is brilliant. Thank you. Other thing that I heard you say that I thought was a takeaway for the listener is that you want evergreen content. Now, I live close to a city called Evergreen. I live up in the mountains. The main trees that we have are evergreen trees. They are pine trees. They are spruce trees. They are fir trees. And each of these trees is always green. And so you're listening and you might not live here. Maybe you live in the desert. Maybe you live somewhere else. And you don't have all these evergreen trees. So what is evergreen content? It means it's content that stays forever. So I want to end today's episode real quick with Junaid to explain, this will be our final takeaway, to explain what do you do in order to ensure it's evergreen content, always green and not going through the seasons and no longer relevant. What are you doing? Because I know that you want to do that. What decisions do you make in the podcast in order to be able to keep it that way? So in order to make sure that it is an evergreen content, I start with the origin story. I learn about the person, what they've done, as opposed to what they are doing now or they're launching now. Because even if they're launching something today or tomorrow, it is going to be relevant in the future as well. Oh, they launched this thing. Now, there have been episodes where the links that I've shared are no longer valid because something that they launched, they're no longer promoting. So it comes down to it's a learning experience. And one thing that you said, I am discovering and I have the ability to sift through who gets to come on the episode because I want to be mindful of what kind of value and what kind of culture I'm setting for my own audience, right? They understand who I am, they understand where I come from, and I want to make sure that people that I'm bringing are also from the same mindset and have the same values, essentially. I'm loving that. Hey, like I said, you're going to have to come back on the show. I enjoyed this. Let's jump off, and I want to talk to the listener real quick. Junaid gave me some links. Okay, he gave me links to any social he wanted to share. He gave me links to his company website. He gave me links to his podcast. Everything that he wanted to share, my team has put into the show notes today. So if you want, you could scroll down and you'll be able to connect with him at any of those places. Check out his podcast. Check out his book. It's called Mastering iPhone Video Production. Kind of a cool thing. It talks about techniques and tips for creating professional quality content with your phone. That is going to be in the show notes. He's got his podcast in the show notes, any websites, any social media, that's where to go. And also, as we talked about before, Junaid does, sometimes he'll do a solo episode. He put those out, I think it was episode 400 and 402 or something close to that, where every now and again, or 500, 502, I think, every now and again, he'll put out these solo episodes, and he is utilizing the interview episodes also for great content and for the connection. On my podcast, I do every other episode as well. And I've queued up some content that I think is going to be relevant to you, that you need, that's going to help you be a better podcaster. And that's going to be the very next episode. You don't have to go anywhere. You can go right into the next episode. So I will see you there. By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.